Hey guys, I'm continuing on the PvP guide part 2 with the first game mode we're going to discuss, which is AC. I think it's a game mode that people can pick up like as soon as they're starting their roster. I call it more of an experimentation game mode where you get to swap and switch around a lot of different characters. You get to use the entirety of your roster. So when you're picking a team to fight, right, how do you look and how do you go about it? Well, you look at the opponent and you look at their class. Their class determines which classes you want to use to counter. So in this case, I'm going with a triple combat to take out 2 speeds and a combat. This should negate their attack. You know, a tier 3 or awakened Luke Cage is coming up against a tier 3 Ant-Man. They're both current uniforms. Kraven's a current uniform. In my case, Agent Venom is a current uniform, I would say. And I got my victory there. So you want to pay attention to class. You want to pay attention to the level, right? If they're tier 2, if they're tier 3. When you're coming across teams in Alliance Conquest in the beginning, they generally start out at tier 1 to tier 2s, like so. So you want to counter those teams with about the same level. You don't want to go and start using your meta right away unless it's in a specific region number. So in this case, we're going regions that are outside of the middle region. The middle region 5 is an extremely important region. So your team goes up against other alliances teams to try and conquer as many regions as possible, and these regions consume a certain amount of stars. So you'll go up in these battles and you'll try to collect as many regions as possible to collect as many stars as possible for the week. So you need to strategize, you need to save, you need to build up a lot of your roster if you want to compete in top 500. If you want to compete in top 100, you have to have many meta builds and you have to be extremely coordinated. Now, this is a guide for all players, so I can briefly go over what it's like being in the top 100 in Alliance Conquest, but I'm playing in this quite casually, as you can see. I haven't even developed a lot of teams yet. I'm just going about it, playing it casually. I'm going up the ladder, so we're starting out slow. We're starting out with slower teams, but I'm showing you guys that I could take a region by myself because I've built a lot of tier 2s that are very old, and I've built a mix of tier 3s, awakened characters, and tier 4s. So doing so allows me to be a decent asset for my alliance in this particular mode. It's very numbers based, so the more characters you have that are built, the more likely you're going to be able to use a lot more combinations. The more numbers you have that are playing at the designated time, the more likely you're going to be coordinated to take over regions faster. It's not even about how powerful you are, it's also about how quick you are. Now, if you're playing casually, speed doesn't really matter unless you're around the top 500. Then it starts getting competitive. When you're like below the top 500, like not competing, you have a lot of time to experiment, and the consequences of winning and losing aren't very significant. winning gives you a lot of gold, which is very substantial, but losing still gives you gold and reduces your placement by a couple of hundred levels if you're basing it off one. So you can be in 500 and you lose, and then you can go back to like top 900 or 800. Or if you get down the middle, right? If you're not the losing side or the winning side and you get in the middle, you stay around the same rank. So I'm going over various battles to show you the levels to which Alliance Conquest is played. You can see I've taken over this whole region and I haven't used any meta. But then when you're fighting meta teams that are in more important regions, you generally want to go against it with your own meta. So anybody that is in the top 10 that I mentioned in my PvP guide part 1, you would like to get those characters at a good build with good CTPs if you want to expand your levels in all PvP content. So I highly suggest you have a mix of even the top 30 characters in PvP. I have a whole list in the forum. It will be in the description. But you generally want to build very strong teams for all kinds of different occasions. So once you get that experimental phase together, you'll be able to be more efficient in taking over regions, and then you'll possibly even be ready to compete. So here's some strategies to take over some meta teams. Some of them are kind of easy, some of them aren't. So Carnage teams they could be a mix. Sometimes they can be easy and sometimes they can be hard. So how you want to create teams, it could be a number of different ways, right? Leadership is very important. Support characters for stronger tunes are important. Pairing meta together is important, and I can consider the top 30 characters that are primarily focused in PvP. I do consider them meta to a degree if you're relating them to game modes like this where your entire roster is being used. So Kang could be used into effect. I was facing a Molecule Man, a Doctor Doom was in there. So these characters can still be utilized for the time being despite them being outdated. And here you're going to take a quick glance of my thought process when picking my teams, and I'm kind of going off the fly, so don't copy exactly what I'm doing here in terms of like who I'm pairing who with, but recognize that here's a quick little area where you could access your teams fast and efficient, right? You could utilize that, and remember the rules I said before, like pay attention to leadership. It could be all attack, it could be debuff removal. Utilize what you have. Going over what we went through before, right? Once you understand the class-based system and where everybody should be aligned to, right? Once you've figured out different power levels of different tunes and where to reciprocate it, like I mentioned, when you recognize your region importance, like which regions are more important than others, right? Then you have to recognize that building a roster that's strong will ultimately be the difference maker in determining whether you can compete in top levels of AC or not. Because on top of just having a good roster, you need to know how to mix and match your roster appropriately for each kind of setup, whether it's a beginner setup, whether you're just fighting tier 1s and tier 2s, a medium kind of setup where there's a mix of a couple of meta, mostly non-meta, maybe tier 3s. And then when you get to a region like 5, for example, you may encounter mostly, if not all, teams that are comprised of top 10 to 20 meta. So learn how to mix and match, right? I like to pair Jean and Ghost Rider. I like to pair Silver Surfer and Wolverine. There are people that like to pair Spider-Man and Warlock and Colossus. There are many trends that are used in timeline battle that you could use in your teams. Pay attention to them. Of course, you want to have current uniforms, and I'm not talking about uniforms that just came out. I'm talking about uniforms for specific characters that are current, meaning it's their latest one. So, a lot of them that have come out in the past, maybe 12 to 18 months, I would say are current. Anything before that, you may want to use caution in getting the uniform, because it's most likely that there are already other alternatives to uniforms that are that old. But regardless, if you do those things that I mentioned, you should be able to get ahead in AC, and even for fun, just take over like a region by yourself. And you could play casually or you could play competitively. Now, in this particular arena, I'm using one of my old teams to take on Jean Grey and Wolverine, and I wasn't really successful the first time around, but I used two more or less triple meta teams to take them down, and I would say it was fairly successful. I mean, I usually put two of my own meta teams because they're not the strongest, they're tier 3, but also if one meta team dies because I equip them against the wrong opponent, then I have another meta team to back it up. So there I won against a really strong tier 4 meta team, you know, Jean Grey and Wolverine. I take on a lot of different meta, but I always find time and time again that Warlock is such a problem. You equip various builds to try to counter Warlock, and then you realize even though you were to pick a Reflector, for example, or even somebody like Thanos with support who could tank, he doesn't tank enough, and you can still get the L. So that's why typing is important, because Warlock is a master at taking on pretty much anyone that isn't a speed. Universals get crushed, blasts get crushed, combats obviously get crushed, so you need to be very wary of how people structure their builds too. Not everybody's going to have a Conquest Warlock. Many have a Greed Warlock, so they behave differently. So you want to be conscientious of the trends that go around. You know, be conscientious of PvP structures and teams. Be conscientious of their gear. So know that my philosophy is very important to me, and I treat it very much so to this day, which is attack is the best defense for lower builds, right? So here, I got a lot of defeats against that Warlock team, so I decided to showcase that, and with enough of these tokens that you can get from the shop in your alliance and from playing, I was able to revive a couple of my primary meta. You know, I'm going to showcase how that looks. In total, I ended up reviving like 6 meta, so that was like Spider-Man, Warlock, Thanos, and a couple of others. So those characters are very important to me. They allowed me to restart again, and of course I get my teams that died initially to revive the next day, the next alliance Conquest round. I think there are like 2 rounds in the day, but if you lost your team, you won't get to have them revived until the next day. So you have to be conscientious of the rules of Alliance Conquest, right? You need to utilize your roster in the best way possible. So here, for example, I'm taking into consideration that Warlock is such a greedy killer that I gotta put him with a speed. So Spider-Man is one of the best at taking down most Warlocks, and he can do it twice as well. So even if he doesn't succeed in killing him twice, that's why you need to have good backups around him. So my Carnage was able to kill the Warlock as well. And he made the mistake of not having debuff removal with that Warlock and pairing him with non-meta for the most part. So I was able to take it on with also like more or less non-meta minus like Spider-Man. I mean, I used Carnage also, but my Carnage is built a little bit different. So, here, for example, there's a Jean Grey that's alone. Jean Greys can be taken down very easily alone by reflectors. So, Destroyer, Ancient One, these guys take down Jean Greys very simply. And if you have good characters around those reflectors, you should be able to take Jean down in the second revive, because that's where reflectors lose their momentum, is after that second revive. So you have to build a good team around reflect supports, right? Because they are considered supports in most cases. I mean, Ancient One specifically is very much a support character. So when I win against these teams, my teams then go on defense if I take a region, and then I can't reuse those teams, so be conscientious, right? So now I'm going up against this Thanos, and I could use my Thanos, and I'm reciprocating that team, or I can use a counter. I could put Warlock there, who is a serious counter to Thanos, and to Wolverine, and to Jean. So Warlock is probably one of your best, if not your best PvP toon. So you could utilize Warlock in many different ways. You can utilize Wolverine in many different ways. So be conscientious of your top 3 meta. If you don't have all of the top 3 meta, you could have at least 2, especially for the other game modes I'm going to discuss, right? It's good to have the top 4 to 7 meta. So, like, it's good to have characters like Spider-Man. It's good to have characters like Ghost Rider, because Spider-Man is a very cheap tier 4, very good in PvP still. One of the main metas back in the day. Ghost Rider has value everywhere. So if you got Ghost Rider's seasonal uniform, even if you didn't get his artifact in this game mode, he can still be useful. You can get characters like Hulk, and you could still make use of that. People use characters like Kang. People use characters like Black Widow. They could be useful in certain scenarios. You could use the Warriors of the Sky. The Warriors of the Sky are sometimes used in Otherworld Battle, and you can use them in AC. You can use the Defenders. There's a lot of different setups you could use. So now you could see that my team has taken over a lot of the regions, and 5 being the main one. So I'm showcasing a few more counters, particularly against Warlock. And yeah, this is how you would play AC casually. This is a very casual setup. You know, when you're competing in the top 100, for example, communication is key. All of the things I can say to you are just tips and tricks, and they're they're they aren't going to be definite, right? There's a lot of different setups you could use with characters, suggestions that I made in my part one, and competitively, it's a whole different story. You know, playing competitively, you got to have top communication. You have to have players present at any given moment. Here, I'm showcasing a team that I lost to, but I took out the meta anyway, so you could just cover it with any team you want. Being in a top 50 AC team, they really helped me learn the aspect of communication and organization. I mean, they've done things like set up communication in their own channel. They take regions with perfect effectiveness. So, keeping that in mind and keeping my tactics in mind, I hope that they help you. All right, now we're moving on to Otherworld Battle. And as you can see, I'm collecting those decent rewards that I got at the end of the season. So I'm starting from scratch. Got some crystals, no debuffed characters. So we're ready to pick our best 5, right? We're done experimenting with switching and swapping a bunch of different team selections. We have an idea of which uniforms to get. Now we could focus on selecting our best 5 and competing up the ladder, right? So you get to pick 5, you get to pick different buffs. So I can recommend that buff that I just selected right there has a chance to remove all debuffs. That's a good one. It's usually a starting buff, right? Because the better buffs usually come after the first week. So towards the third, fourth week, you start seeing buffs that I would recommend to you. So starting out, you have to utilize what you have, grab those rewards and try and select your best team because you are only going to be fighting the best. After you get the buffs I recommend, like removing all debuffs, ignore dodge, HP, once you get these buffs on your primary meta, right? And I'm talking top 3, Gene, Warlock, and Wolverine, paired with some of the top 4 through 10 that I mentioned, right? You have to have a mix of a lot of these characters. So you place them on the board in however way you want. And if you look here closely, you'll see that after leveling up all my buffs to the best of my ability, putting them on the characters, right? You want to have defense with more defensive characters. You can also put them on offensive characters if you want to have a mix of both. You put ignore dodge on characters who lack it, and you put remove all debuff to the target on a strong character that prioritizes his skills. So you have an advantage there, right? So after you do all that, you want to place your characters on the board, right? Physically. And you'll notice, and I'll explain this later, that placing your characters on the board is also important. You have the placements of 1 through 5, but you also tend to want to place your strongest characters more towards the center of the ring, so they have a better area of effect against your opponents. And I'll explain that later because I was just learning this as I went along because, well, there's a lack of guides for PvP. So as you move up the ladder, I'm starting in Vibranium. I already get a very easy team to beat. You usually get the bottom of the barrel teams when you're starting out, and that's okay. It makes it easier for you to climb up the ladder. So, you know, even after the first match, you'll start seeing like people do the same thing. They're starting to climb up the ladder. They have a blend of meta with a support or two supports that give buffs like debuff removal to the entire team. Now, there's two or three characters that do it. The most popular ones are Wasp and Strife. These characters give debuff removal to the whole team. So they add a significant amount of value, and most teams pair them with these characters. So Strife and Wasp is in most teams. Why? Because with debuff removal, characters don't get stunned for the first 10 to 12 seconds. I'm reminding you because you can't access this through a leadership, right? Because a lot of these characters have leaderships that give debuff removal. You have to get it from a passive that applies it to everybody. So that's why Strife is very valuable, right? So you want to look and you want to see where your team is placed in the ring. And I say to put your team more towards the center because the targeting in this game is very odd and range is very much taken into effect. You want the range of your skills to be in place so your characters actually target the AI. It's always been an issue with that, and I just recognized it and realized it. So I'm reminding you guys and I'm warning you guys so you don't make the same mistakes that I did, because last season me getting into Challenger was very easy. I did about 100 battles in total and I had like a 70% win ratio, and it was very easy for me to stick in the league without me physically playing, because the game plays for you. So it's very interesting. But I'm going to showcase different tactics against different teams. I'm going to showcase my wins and why I got them, and my L's as well. And there's a lot of tactics that I'm going to go over that I feel are very important. And week one isn't very important. It's more of place your best team, get into the middle of Vibranium, and then if your team is good enough, you'll win against a lot of opponents. So it may raise your score up overnight without you even doing anything. It showcases that you have a strong team. So be wary of who you pick. Be wary of where you pick them. Be wary of the buffs you put on them. Those are some elements that you take into account during the first week, right? And then as you progress, you want to analyze how you want to go about certain battles. So I personally realized that I want characters like Wolverine in the beginning who can sweep the board, and I want characters like Ghost Rider or Warlock towards the end who can also sweep the board. Now, I was looking at Thanos because I know that Thanos prioritizes his best skill, but he's not completely defensively set up. So even at tier 4, he can get caught out with remove all debuffs from all active buffs. That buff I was telling you about that you can get from the store. So he can get affected by that. And he's not completely defensive. So that leaves him open. I realized in this battle that Thanos was my weakest link. You want to analyze your weakest link when you're experimenting with your meta, because your meta builds really have to be perfect when you're coming up against tier 4 builds, right? If you have tier 3 builds rocking tier 4 builds, your CTPs need to be perfect. If they're not, they're probably going to outclass you. So you utilize characters with revive always. You utilize characters that prioritize their skills that are the best skills. Like Wolverine always prioritizes his fifth, the Warlock always prioritizes his second. So in the beginning, as soon as the match starts, you always have a pause. So that's kind of annoying. Like the characters just use the X skill. It halts the game a lot and creates kind of like an RNG element where it's kind of like a coin toss almost. But you want to utilize characters that can kill the opponent very quickly in the beginning of the match, and you want to have characters that last defensively as bullet sponges, so your offensive characters like Wolverine and or like Warlock, depending on how you build them, could kill as quickly as possible. However, even despite this example on full display, you can still get an L, and you shouldn't go too high for your buck, right? You shouldn't be taking on with tier 3s, tier 4 meta of the same that are better than you that have a double support in Strife and Colossus, because those teams I generally avoid, because those teams are meant to be challenger teams. A lot of challenger teams make those builds, and they can be very, very hefty because throughout the other weeks you can get more defensive buffs that could really give you the edge in battle, like ignore damage received or decrease damage received after a certain health threshold. So you're going to be utilizing a lot of different strategies as weeks go by. Now I'm showcasing battles for the second week in Otherworld Battle, and you could see that the debuffs are applying to some of the meta. In this case, it's Jean, Wolverine, and Adam Warlock. But as you could see, I'm still rocking at least one of those debuffed characters. And the reason why I picked Wolverine instead of Warlock and Jean Grey is because Wolverine, while debuffed, he has his attack, his defenses, and his HP decreased, but his attack is still significant enough to take on a lot of the meta if he's built properly. In this case, I got a defeat because I'm still figuring out how to utilize some alternatives while this week has a debuffed meta. So, for example, right, if you have Warlock debuffed, you may want to have Spider-Man as an alternative. For Jean, for example, you may want to have a Reviver. For example, you may want to have Sentry, Kang, or maybe even Cersei and Doctor Doom as an alternative. If Wolverine is debuffed, you may even want to go for an alternative like Ghost Rider or Carnage to mimic those same effects, right? The Undying Revive effect, the one-shot potential. You want to mimic those effects. With non-revive tunes like Thanos and Hulk, for example, these characters need to be completely defensively buffed to the point of max level. If they're not, they'll die quite easily. So that's why you see characters that have revives over characters that don't have revives oftentimes. So you can appreciate this game mode because it expands the diversity of PvP structured characters. So older characters now seem to have more value in this area of the game where meta are constantly debuffed every single week. So it's relatively appropriate, it's relatively fun, it adds strategic elements to it, at least some, and it's very enjoyable. It's also very easy to pick up and to move up the ladder. By the way, you just saw there that I equipped a debuff related character buff. I only did that because it's only week 2, and while many characters rock debuff removal, for example, if you have the remove debuffs from all buffs that I mentioned that you should get, if that applies, then debuffs can apply and it could be dangerous. So it could work in some cases, but of course not all cases, but not every single team has a team with debuff removal. So here, you know, in this case, the more people you can gang up on the opponent, the better. So here, I'm fighting a Colossus team, and I usually say to avoid Colossus teams. However, this team isn't equipped with a debuff removal support. So I basically have only one character that's died. It's the debuffed Wolverine, and I pretty much wiped the board. So that's how it's showcasing the importance of having a debuff removal passive in the whole team. It also showcases how some debuffed tunes don't work, like Gene, and then they try to use Colossus as an alternative. I'm figuring out the importance of Colossus during debuff character weeks, because he really bumps up your characters that are not debuffed, and they could easily sweep the board without the top 3 meta being present. So it adds elements of strategy. Like here, for example, I lost because Ghost Rider and Spider-Man were equipped with triple supports. So, you know, my tier 3s going up against a tier 4 with triple support is going to be a very risky ordeal. So know your place. Understand how powerful your tunes are, right? You need a good understanding, because there are certain tier 4s that you should be confident in killing and not confident, right? When you get up the ladder, characters are going to become much harder to kill because they're not going to have regular CTPs. They're going to have brilliant CTPs, potentially of Conquest. So, I mean, as you can see, undying artifacts and revive characters are generally picked, and some revive characters have the bug where they have an animation for when they revive, and I think that animation should be removed altogether because it creates a glitch and it makes the character virtually useless for that second revive. So I think they should fix that. Here I'm going up against another triple support like team. Strife is very valuable because he acts as both a support and a character that kills meta. So here I'm having a bit of a tough time, but I've taken out the characters without revive. So that's another reason why revive characters are generally preferred. So now I'm approaching Challenger. I've already reached it and I'm getting to the 3rd week. So now the debuff list has changed, and it's coming towards now that Warlock and Wolverine are not debuffed anymore, and instead Ghost Rider, Jean, and Spider-Man are debuffed now. So now those are the 2 meta that people primarily pick, with alternative meta to Jean and such. As you can see, the teams that I'm coming across in Challenger are much tougher. Granted, I was fighting similar teams in Vibranium also, but that's why you have the ability to change your opponent, because in Vibranium there's a lot of tier 3 easy teams. In Challenger there's only a few, and it starts getting much harder as you get to around that rank, around 3700. So keep in mind, like, even Warrior of the Sky teams, which, by the way, is a great strategy if you pair them with Sunbird, because it's a revive with long awaken skills. But you may want to use characters like Cersei, who have the same element, and avoid debuff characters like Ghost Rider. If Wolverine was a debuff character, I would still use him like before, but since Ghost Rider is a debuff character, I'd use Colossus instead. In that last match, like I was warning you guys before, my Warlock was standing around because I placed him wrong. So when I fixed his placement and I added a support, right, my team did a lot better. And I mean, this team was in around the 3800 placement against Madeline Pryor and other meta. So I think overall my strategies fared me well, and I hope it does the same for you in your quest for Challenger. Alright, so now we are in timeline battle. Now, once you've got your experimental teams and you know exactly who goes where and why, right? And then you pick your best 5 in Otherworld battle, and then you find out how far you can go there. Here you could play either one of two ways. You can be like me and you can be a little bit crazy and you could try your best to use diversity, even though it's extremely risky, and the number of patterns that you have to remember on manual play is obviously ridiculous. Not many people would do what I do, so I can recommend a few teams that I would use that a lot of whales often use in PvP, and I can give you some suggestions on how to use them on manual play. You could go into your whatever respective league that you choose. You could play a couple of matches. By a couple of matches, I mean a couple for the week, and you could get a good amount of crystals without having to do much effort. And then you can just autoplay them, right? You don't have to play this game mode a lot to stay in your league and to get crystals. If you want to compete because you enjoy it and it's fun and you want to get a trophy by your name to signify that you know what you're doing, then I would recommend these 3 teams. And granted, the restrictions, sometimes they ban the meta and sometimes they don't. So only Ghost Rider is banned. So basically, I'm going to use the top 3 meta and put them in 3 different teams. And I'm going to classify them in a specific way. So I'm going to put this team together. I want attack with Jean. I'm going to start Ancient One for a number of reasons. I got her artifact to give her defense, and I've got invincibility on her with steel. So I'm going to start her. Then I'm going to put this team together. And then I'm going to put this team together. These teams are going to get me wins. 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to pick the hardest teams that I feel are in this game. Team number 1. How would you use it? Easiest way, start with Ancient One, get rid of Jean. Kill her first, keep distance, use 3 or 4. Preferably 3 because invincibility. Jean versus Warlock could take him out most of the time, not all of the time. There, Warlock did a glitch, so of course I wasn't going to make it. Here, I'm not going to take a risk with Jean and kill him twice, because it is possible to kill him twice. I'm going to go with Thanos, and I'm going to use the benefits of the steal effect. And I'm going to use the benefits of a decoy. And I may have to use another decoy, depending on what happens to Thanos. But Thanos was fine. Easy win. I have Jean left over just in case Thanos died. That was a brilliant Conquest Warlock with a brilliant Authority Wolverine with Jean starting, right? So that was pretty simple, right? Let's go with this team. This team, right? You look at this team, and this is kind of a more luxurious team, but it's not the best team in the world, right? Like Thanos is decent in PvP. Ancient One is good against Jean Grey, but Jean Grey is top 3 meta, and you can build a team around her and be okay. She's tier 3 and she's doing just fine, right? This is, I would say, a grade B team, right? This is a grade C team. You got Wolverine because he's your favorite. You got the artifact from story mission or from a selector because you got lucky, and he was one of your first tier 4s. Spider-Man you got as an old tier 4 because he was top in PvP and now he's not. And you don't have Jean, you don't have Madeline Pryor, and you don't have many others. And this is a backup team that you could use against the meta. This is a grade A luxurious team that you can probably win with all the time with just a Warlock alone. So we'll go with this team now against Archron. And I'm only going to pick 3 opponents with 3 teams, and then I'll go and do some ranked matches. So I want to switch to a Reflector. Silver Surfer, again, Authority. Good Reflector. Use a 5 from distance. Then I could kind of get a half a kill in this situation. I can get a full kill if it was agreed. Warlock. Keep distance. Use a 3 cancel 5. Wolverine still has a life, by the way. Spider-Man, sorry buddy, you're going to be a decoy. But that's okay. Why? Because my Wolverine can take on this Wolverine in 2 lives. That's why. Keep distance. Use 3 a lot. Use 5 during the midpoints. Run away from his 5th. And then use your 5th again. And you should be able to kill him. Just like I did there. An exact replica. Now, let's go to this team. This team is a luxurious team. But if you have a tier 4 Warlock, you could probably, you probably don't have to use a support like I do. And you don't have to use debuff removal. The team's a little difficult to use, but not that difficult, right? I'll show you why. So you got an awakened character with penetration ready to go. Now, don't just do 2. You gotta do a skill that protects you. So I made a mistake. I'm going to see if I could get away with it somehow. Even though I don't think I can. Only if I can kill Wolverine with Warlock with 1 life, which is going to be very difficult, but it's possible. And especially possible if I can do this. Yes! No! That was nonsense. Oh! Man, I'm going to get an L, but I was 1 hit away from winning that match. And it's because I just made 1 small mistake. Imagine if I don't make that mistake. So I do 2 cancel 3. Now I got 2 lives. And this is a Conquest Warlock. All I'm doing is canceling the 5 and the 4 and the 2. Right? Or something along those lines. 5, 3, 2, 4. Right? Pretty simple. 1 shot, reflect kill, a switch at the right moment. Perfect decoy. Do a zigzag manual move that I love to do. Keep yourself in protection. 2 from distance. I still had a life. The next opponent I'm going to face is LSD. He likes to hide, but This guy's team is ridiculous. He's got a Conquest Warlock and a Conquest Wolverine. They're both brilliant. So I'm going to show you guys how to beat, in my opinion, one of the hardest teams in the game. So I like to do... I realize that you got to do a double switch here to avoid his attacks. I guess I got lucky with that original hit. Here's what I gotta do with Thanos, though. Thanos is at full health for the most part. Oh, and I got him there. Boom. Done. Just combine all your skills. The ignore dodge helps. Tier 4 Striker is an insta-kill. Team number 2. You have to utilize your crowd as well. Swap when it's necessary. Know that Spideys can tank Conquest Warlocks. Keep distance a lot of the time too. I use the decoy for Wolverine as a personal choice to showcase an example if I can conduct it. I may not be able to. Maybe I can. Nah. So that's why you have to know which character to use at the specific moment. Utilize the tactic I did before, which was keep Spider-Man in. Unless Warlock has agreed, then don't keep Spider-Man in. If you want, I could switch to Silver Surfer, but I probably wouldn't want to. Maybe now I could, because then I can make him a decoy for the next round. Utilize decoys, utilize reflect characters. See, now Silver Surfer served two purposes for me, and then Wolverine with a greed can take on a Conquest Wolverine, and he can also take on a Conquest Warlock, and he can kill the opponent right after because he still has penetration. So utilize your other skills. Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And it's not that hard. And you shouldn't be afraid to get an L or two, you know? You're gonna get an L. Because the game rigs. And I'm gonna showcase a video of that later. You could utilize the benefits of manual play. And you could take advantage of it. And you can have a lower-ish build like me and still get away with it, too. Let's see if I can cancel Wolverine's skill. Nah. Not enough. What happened to my fit skill? Ooh. The super guard break. The damage immunity. The iframe ignore. Perfect. I'm fighting this team because when I was competing against her with my original teams, Madeline Pryor was very difficult to kill. I'm trying to freaking switch my character, and it's not letting me. It's giving her extra defense for no reason at all, other than to give her extra defense. But not a problem. With my original teams, it was difficult. With these teams, I may be able to get a win. Much easier. Remember, practice keeping distance, practice switching, and you can get the win with a 3-year-old character, a year-old character, and a meta, right? Okay, let's use the second team. The thing with Jean Grey is my Jean Grey tier 3 is having an extremely hard time with her, so I'm not even going to bother. I don't know why. Quite strong. It's just giving her extra defense. I really feel like it's just giving her extra defense. Oh, I got some resistance too. But not enough. Jean can still kill her. I'm actually finding out that now. But for some reason, like her defense is very much all over the place. Like I can't predict when her defense is going to be insanely high or insanely low. Round 2. Don't let Ancient One die. Run away from her skills because it's easy to. She's gonna do another counter. Yeah, she can get you there, so once you kill her the first time, take your time killing her the second time. And then Jean should be able to kill him twice. Five, 3, should do the trick. Land on the knife frame. Done. See, that's not so hard. And my card stats are not the greatest. I have only 19% pierce, and I'm using a tier 3 Jean Grey very effectively with a judgment. Okay. Third team. Let's bring out the new Mystique. And let's bring out Destroyer. No reflex, so you gotta watch out. Very high defense. And then she just randomly killed me. Alright. Pretty nice. Not gonna lie. I gotta combine my skills against her. You've gotta run away from her during the second rotation. Because first rotation, she has all of her skills up. So you want to wait until she uses her fifth and then her second again. Yeah, that is an indication of her second right there. Bam. Double switch. An awaken skill. Easy as shit. Bam. And that's how you do it, folks. In my last little clip, I'm going to go into ranked matches, and I do this because you have to understand that practice makes perfect, and you should always go into a practice match before you go into a ranked match, because I really try to warn everybody that timeline battle in particular is very rigged. And when you go into ranked matches, you'll first notice that the HP spikes are there, right? There's HP spikes from practice mode to ranked mode. That's one thing you have to keep in mind. Another thing is that penetration, it doesn't work exactly how it says. It's really either it works 100% and it's affected with how much attack you have, or it doesn't work at all. You have to keep in mind these warnings before I, go into battle, because if you get a loss, you may feel demotivated playing. And while I don't want you to use crazy teams that are really hard to use, I would rather you use teams that fit your description, and you can get away with maybe sneaking in a top 100 win and getting the benefit out of a game that's a little bit stagnant. We're going to go in. I'm going to spend some crystals because that's what you have to do to compete. I'm already in a high level, but I have a lot of L's because I've been using Thanos and Sinister, and that team is insanely hard to use. So I'm actually glad that I'm using this team. It's much easier having two meta together with a support. A support could come in a leadership with debuff removal, or a support could come as a reflector. So in this case, I do what I usually do with Ancient One. And now we're going to come up against Madeline Pryor, who doesn't have a... I gotta wait for a second rotation. I gotta watch out for her counter very carefully. She planted that pink effect on the ground. That's how I knew. And there you go. That was a very easy Maddie kill. Very easy Maddie kill. Switch done. See you later. A lot of lag going on. I'm going to play 2 matches with each team so you get an understanding. I'm facing hard teams that are difficult. I actually particularly want to go up against a Wolverine that's starting. I know which team that is, but I'm looking for him. I am crazy because my losses come from me trying to get a revenge kill on the person that killed me, and that isn't the best thing to do at all. You may get a lot of L's doing that, so don't do that. If you get the L, just treat it like a test. Just skip and go to the next one. And if you want to rematch him like towards the end. I think this guy has a Wolverine starting. I could be wrong, but I want to showcase that. Yes. So here, use Thanos. Get the steal up 4 right when he does the 5. Try to kill him if you can, because Conquest not going to be able to. There, I have to switch to Jean, but it may be a tactical error. Ooh, I survived. Now I'm going to try and run away from Warlock, even though it's going to be difficult. Okay, I did it, because Thanos has the movement speed to do it. That tactic you can use. Ancient One is not going to get this kill. No way. But I gotta be very careful with Thanos right now. Okay. Try to get the tier 4 up. You see, the tier 4 is an insta-kill. Now, comfortable, just 5 and just cancel out, 4 and just cancel all my skills, because Thanos, I don't like to screw around. Thanos is very inconsistent with his penetration, but he's otherwise consistent everywhere else. That's why I recommend him, because if you got his seasonal uniform and you're like, oh my god, he still doesn't kill Jean Grey. Yes, he does. If you're like, oh my god, he has no use in PvP. Yes, he does. He with the steal effect, he can still kill all of the meta, but you just have to be careful with him. Going back to this team, this is like the backup team, and Wolverine is really not a backup, but I was thinking, so many people had him for so long that he was desperately needed for a rework, and we all knew he was going to be PvP, and he needed to stick in PvP. So this uniform really has transformed him into such a formidable foe. He's still better than Madeline Pryor, despite Madeline Pryor potentially being a third place candidate now. And don't worry, I will update the list. So you will get to see Madeline Pryor in an updated list. See, 2 supports, that's interesting that I can still kill her. But, you know, it is what it is. It's because of probably Mighty Conquest. You need to have a Brilliant Conquest. Because there's levels. I'm not going to put Wolverine in right away. I'm not going to kill Spider-Man, but I will kill Silver Surfer because Silver Surfer can maybe get a kill for Jean at the end, but that's probably about it. 1, 2, 3. Do the 5. Do the best you can with it. Switch as soon as the meter goes down to his 3. Go from distance. Use the 5 again. And try your best. The rest, good luck. Oh. Oh, wow, okay. This win would be pretty epic. Not gonna lie, it would be pretty epic. Oh, man. Oh, man, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. What a win. What a win. Showcasing greatness. Why Spider-Man is still the underrated champ. Okay, now we're going to go into a tougher team. This team is tough in certain areas. If Wolverine is first, with this team, it's actually cake. And I'll show you why. Switch, run away. 2 from distance, cancel 3. Try to get that kill. Okay, keep yourself in protection. Bang! Bang! Get the 2 up in a timely fashion. Sorry, Mystique. Bang! Standing menacingly. Also standing menacingly. And by the way, standing menacingly. See, guys, that's not so hard. And I mean, timeline battle could either be really hard for you, or it could be relatively simple. Okay. Triple meta with 6 revives. How am I going to do this? It's my first time using this team against this team, so... Okay. Run. Oh... Come on. That's nonsense. Well, you know, you can't win them all, right? Maybe I should try the rematch. And I may want to showcase how many times it takes to get the opponent once you lose. Once you lose, it either takes you 2 times together or 80 times to get the same freaking person. Showcasing the problems in PvP. That will be a video. Madeline Pryor counter video will be another video because I'm only showcasing her a little bit. Alright, let's use a decoy. Okay, she's gonna use the counter again. Screwed up. Oh, I'm dead, I'm dead, I'm dead. I died again. Sorry, guys. Take 4, but I had take 3. And I'm going into practice mode after losing a bunch of freaking games. and it's just how I roll. I get myself into a tough situation, and I gotta figure it out because I gotta give good advice, right? So after doing the same rotations with the same characters, right? You're figuring out a new character. Use a decoy just in case. Have her use up all of her skills because her skills... Okay. That was pretty good. Okay, let's see if I can kill her fast. Alright. Sentry, here we go. Nice. Go. Go, Sentry. Perfect. That is a sneak peek into what Netmarble is probably going to do with Sentry. But listen, there can be a lot of different team combinations, right? Use decoy characters as invincibility bullet sponges and have them as debuff removal leads. Put supports in there. Get reflectors in there. Some you can get away with tier 3, but others you gotta have tier 4, so keep in mind about that. Understand your ranking, so if you want to stay in platinum and you want to avoid vibranium, that's okay, because vibranium teams are very difficult. I mean, you could switch it up. If you have a tier 4 warlock, you could do this. If you have like 2 meta, you could do this. If you have triple meta, you could separate them out, or you could maybe switch it up. You could do a lot of different combinations and have fun with it. You know, understanding this video, hopefully it gives you the knowledge you need to not only succeed in PvP despite its rigging mechanics, but also have fun in it, because as of right now, the game isn't changing very much. We should always try to make it better when we can. So that's it for this video. Subscribe if you're new, and there's going to be a lot more content on the way. So stay tuned, and thanks for watching.